feels like it's been 700 years since I sat down and filmed a video. So let's talk about what has changed. Hair, darker. House, new. Not that you can tell because the backdrop is kind of the same. I'm using a ring light, which I don't know if you can tell. You can probably tell from the shadows. I love my new house and I love my bedroom, but the light the light in here. It gets really good light like first thing in the morning, and then she's like a little dungeon. But you know what? That's okay. We're just going to call it cozy. We're going to stick with cozy instead of dungeon. I am praying that when I go to edit this footage, something doesn't go funky, because I'm not a good enough editor to know how to do color grading or anything. I will say, looking in the camera with this blinding ring of light right around is gonna potentially cause permanent damage to my retinas, but this is what I do for you guys, you know. This is love. As you may or may not know, if you've been around for a while and seen my vlog series, you may not know that I'm a little bit of a sad girl at the moment. I'm in my sad girl era, I'm in my breakup era, I'm in my will I ever love again era. So it just really seemed fitting to talk about Sad Girl Lit Fic. So first of all, let's talk about what Sad Girl Lit Fic is. Okay, so I feel like Sad Girl Lit Fic is not necessarily defined by the book itself being sad. Like, I think that's part of it. I feel like the plot of the book being a bit sad, being a bit weepy, being a bit emotional is kind of to be expected. But I think at the core, at the center, at the gooey delicious center of Sad Girl Lit Fic, what we have is a sad woman. And as a fellow trademark sad woman, I think I'm in a really good position to recommend you some of these books. So let's just dive in. So I feel like it's not possible to talk about Sad Girl Lit Fic without talking about the patron saint of sad girls, Sylvia Pla. We're gonna start really obvious and basic, okay? Also, this matches my jumper. We're gonna start with the patron saint of sad girls, and that is Sylvia Plath and the Bell Jar. So the Bell Jar is set in, I want to say 1950s in New York, and it's about our main character Esther, who is interning at a fashion magazine in summer in New York, and she's trying to like find her feet and find her place in the world. But basically, Esther is just a depressed icon. And yes, it does feel slightly weird saying that, considering that Esther is, I would say loosely, but honestly it's not very loosely based off the actual Sylvia Plath. It's sort of like a semi-autobiographical fiction novel, and Sylvia Plath did go on to commit suicide. I just think this is such a beautiful exploration of just what it is to be a sad girl to begin with, but also like what it is to try and find your place in the world, particularly in a time for the main character Esther where she is feeling really shackled and constricted by the constraints placed on her as a woman. She's trying to find her feet and find her career and find herself and her individuality and her strength, and she's really brought down by a patriarchal society that sort of just expects her to sit at home and like pump out babies. And I do think that the person of Sylvia Plath, that's something that she talks a lot about in her actual poetry, about, you know, the expectations placed on women, particularly to be mothers, particularly in this period of time. But honestly, this is not a long book, and I think this has a lot of beautiful things to say about life and not knowing the best way to get the most out of life. I think the most known, it's not really a quote because it's a whole paragraph, but the most known sort of section of this story is where Sylvia Plath is talking about, or Esther, but the author Sylvia Plath is talking about a fig tree and how the character Esther fears that she will sit beneath the fig tree all her life looking at these figs, trying to pick which is the best one to eat, and then she'll spend so long trying to figure out which is the best one to eat that all of the figs will rot and fall off the tree. And I do think that's a really beautiful allegory, is that the right word, metaphor for what it is to be a woman in your 20s or in 30s. I still don't know what the fuck I'm doing with my life. In your 30s, and to just feel paralyzed by choice. You have so many things to choose from, which can be such a beautiful thing. And I think particularly for the character of Esther, in a time of the 1950s where women were very limited by choice, I think the fact that she is still struggling to know what is the best direction to take in her life, she's paralyzed by the fear that she's going to make the wrong choice and then end up somewhere that she shouldn't be. I really relate to that as someone who is in her 30s and still trying to work out what she wants to do with her life. I feel like the fig tree metaphor is one that a lot of women, but like a lot of people can relate to. So we have to start this video off with a bang. The Bell Jar by Sylvia Pla. If you haven't read this and you call yourself a fan of Sad Girl Lit Fic, then what are you even doing? Go read this immediately. I recently reread this and was reminded of just how wonderful it is. Sylvia Plath is best known for her poetry, but her works of fiction are also absolutely beautiful, and I would highly, highly, highly recommend. I do hate this cover though. Can I just say I hate this cover so much? I think it's so ugly. The next book I want to recommend is The Book of X by Sarah Rose Edda. I have talked about this on this channel before. I feel like a lot of the books I'm going to be talking about today are unfortunately ones I've talked about on this channel before. I'm so sorry, I don't really have anything new to recommend. But The Book of X is about our main character Cassie, who is born with a literal knot in her stomach, like an actual physical deformity, and it is something that all of the women in her family have. Her mother had it, her grandmother has it, great-great-grandmother has it, and I think it's a really beautiful metaphor for generational trauma. But basically it's talking about Cassie moving through life with this literal knot in her stomach, trying to work out the softest places for her to exist in society and how to basically just get through the day when she has a really obvious, impossible to hide physical deformity that makes moving through life very difficult for her. I do think, as I said, it's a really beautiful metaphor for generational trauma, but I also think it's a really beautiful metaphor for just generally what it is like to be a woman in current times, with the pressures that we do have to look a certain way and for our bodies to fit into certain shapes. We follow Cassie from her childhood through to her teenagehood, through to being an adult, where she's left her small town and moved to the city. And I also think it is a really wonderful take on how the grief that you feel for your everyday life isn't something that is necessarily going to go away just because you geographically move. I can attest to that. Moving to a new space, it can definitely help, but it does not make the sadness just disappear. I also think this has I don't know, I'm such a sucker for a coming of age story, and I do think this is a really beautiful coming of age. It talks about grappling with your body and with your sexuality and with the restraints that society puts on us. Society. I also love how Sarah Rose Edda has a really wonderful way of blending like the real and surreal to the point where you never really know if it's actually happening. I think another great example of her doing this is in Ripe, when the main character has like a black hole that follows her around in her sight, but you never really know if it's like a literal black hole or if it's like a metaphor for depression. But again, I think her family owns like a meat farm, like literally meat farm. Like they go to a ravine and carve meat off the walls, and again, obviously that's not real, but in the context of the world of the book, it is real. So it's one of those things where it's like a realistic story set against these very surreal themes. I don't even know what I'm saying, but I do love how Sarah Rose Edda basically blends like the surreal and the fantastical with real life. And I'm just putting it out there, if you are someone who doesn't like gore, doesn't like body horror, this is definitely not the book for you. I will also say maybe read the trigger warnings for this one first. I don't want to say anything on this video because I don't want to spoil anything that happens in the book, but there are some pretty heavy duty things that happen in this book. So if you're someone who is like easily not, if you are someone who finds themselves really easily upset and hurt by things in books, then definitely just make sure you check out the trigger warnings for this one. Sad Girl Lit Fic, The Book of X, Sarah Rose Edda, but also Ripe by Sarah Rose Edda. It's her first book. It's also very, very much Sad Girl Lit Fic. The next one I want to talk about is an Australian book, and that is Mother Tongue by Naomi Brown. This is a book where our main character Bryn is kind of like like she's fallen into this life of a 1950s style housemaid, but in the 21st century. It is something that she thought she always wanted. She's met her perfect husband, Eric. They have a daughter. They live in a beautiful house in the suburbs. Bryn is a stay-at-home mum. Eric brings in the bacon, and one day Bryn trips and falls on the ice and smacks her head and wakes up speaking French. And it's essentially her taking the opportunity to start a new life. But what I love about this book, and what I love about just books in particular, are books that have multiple POVs from the chapters. So we get Bryn's POV, obviously. We get the POV of her husband, Eric, which is like, fine, whatever. But then we also get the POV of their daughter, Jenny. So this is not a spoiler, by the way. This is literally on the back blurb of the book. After Bryn has her accident, she sort of basically picks up, abandons her life, and moves to Paris and leaves behind her daughter and her husband. So not only do we get the perspective of Bryn before her accident and then after the accident, so her just trying to find her place in the world, her really questioning what is the point of everything, and what if she is a mother, like she's literally a mother, she has a child, and yet she doesn't feel that maternal draw like she thought she would, then what is her purpose, and what is the purpose of all of this, trademark all of this. But we also get the perspective of their daughter Jenny trying to grapple as a young girl and then as a teen with being someone who has been abandoned by the person who is supposed to love you the most on the face of the planet. And I thought that was a really beautiful perspective. It's not something that I guess see a lot in books. I'm sure that is out there. It's just maybe stuff that I haven't read. But I really love how this book challenges our kind of like modern expectations of motherhood, but it also has some really great, I think, metaphors for like microaggressions and racism that we have in our modern day society. Eric is a bit of a gun-toting, Trump-loving kind of guy, and he really struggles to adjust when Bryn wakes up speaking not only a different language, but with very different worldviews and values. And I thought that was a really interesting perspective as well. As much as I would say this is Sad Girl Lit Fic, because again, I don't think the book itself necessarily has to be sad for it to fall into Sad Girl Lit Fic, but I do think the characters of Bryn and Jenny are what cements it in this category. But it is actually quite funny. There are some moments of like real dark humor, laugh out loud, and I think it takes a real skill and a real art for an author to balance those two things. So if you were looking for something that definitely explores some deeper, darker themes, but at the same time manages to do that in kind of like a light-hearted, funny way, then I would definitely recommend Mother Tongue by Naomi Brown. The next one I want to talk about is The Guest by Emma Cline. This is, if you are someone who doesn't like books that are no plot, just vibes, you will not enjoy this book. I can confidently say nothing happens in this book, but I loved it. So essentially we follow Alex, who is dating a much richer older man. They are staying in his summer house in the Hamptons when she sort of makes a misstep at a dinner party and embarrasses herself and is unceremoniously kicked to the curb. Knowing that nothing good awaits her back in New York, she's like behind on her rent, she owes people money, blah 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 blah. She's basically like, I kind of just want to stay here and pretend that real life doesn't exist for a weekend. So we follow her. I do believe the book only takes place over a weekend, or over, it doesn't take place over a really extended period of time, but we essentially just watch Alex drifting through the summer, trying couch surfing and making mistake after mistake after mistake, and just questioning where she belongs in the world, and questioning what is the point of all of this, and just, you know, all those real chill, really cool topics. I really don't have a lot to say about this one because, again, like I said, there is no plot, which I'm totally fine with. If you're someone who doesn't love a no plot, just vibes, you probably won't love this one. But honestly, if you are someone who, like me, really loves just really digging into the deep nitty-gritty psyche of a character and really, really getting to explore the depth of every single thought that a person's ever had, which I just love to do that. We basically just spend like 300 pages in Alex's brain just being like, why is my life the way it is? And honestly, girl, can relate. The Guest by Emma Cline. All of Emma Cline's books are absolutely fabulous. I would recommend all of hers. I also think her other book, The Girls, which is a fictitious retelling of the Manson family, also would fall into the category of Sad Girl Lit Fic, but this one in particular I just thought fit the bill a bit better. I also love books that really accurately portray a particular moment in time. That is, again, a really artful skill, and I think Emma Cline has done a really, really good job of taking the feeling of summer, like that hot, claustrophobic, humid feeling. You know, when you've been out to the beach and you come home and you're covered in sand and you're tired and you have a glass of wine and you just feel that real dopey heaviness set upon you. I think she's done an absolutely fabulous job of somehow translating that feeling into an overarching arc that takes place over the course of like 300 pages, but somehow every sentence and every page is like imbued with that feeling of summer. And I just think that is such an incredible skill, and she's done such a freaking good job of it. So Emma Cline, The Guest. Okay, so the next one is included on this list for multiple reasons, both because the girls in it are sad, but also the topic is just incredibly sad. And I really want to give a big trigger warning at the beginning of this. If you are someone who has ever had an experience with, you know, being abused by a teacher or an older authoritative figure in your life, this is probably not the book for you. But that is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I've talked about this book at length, and you know what? I'm going to talk about it again because I just think it's so freaking fabulous, and I don't hear as many people talking about it that I think should be. So My Dark Vanessa is centered around our main character, Vanessa. Obviously, we get to meet her in two different perspectives of her life. One, we meet her in current times where she is an adult grappling with her past. We meet Vanessa at the age of 15 when she is involved in a sexual relationship with her much, much, much older English teacher, Jacob. So obviously that's fucking deplorable, and any adult, male or female, who gets involved with a child, bruh, just don't. But I think what makes this book just so heartbreaking is the book is told from Vanessa's perspective. So as she's 15, you essentially witness her gaslighting herself into thinking that this relationship with her older teacher is something that she is A, in control of, but B, comfortable with. There are so many instances in this book where you can tell Vanessa's discomfort just drips off the page, and yet you watch her talk herself into a corner and try and rationalize and justify everything that Jacob is doing to her in real time. And it's just fucking heartbreaking. There's no other way to say that. So we get that perspective of her at 15, and then we get the perspective of her as an adult, where she is living her life, has a job, she's still in touch with Jacob. And it comes out in the news media that Jacob has been accused of doing the same thing he did to Vanessa to multiple other girls at the school. Someone approaches Vanessa to try and get her to comment for a news story and to get involved in the lawsuit. And it's her trying to grapple with the fact that she's now having to internally undo all the self-gaslighting she did to come to terms with the fact that the relationship was not in fact a relationship, it was abuse, and she was abused and she was gaslit and controlled by a fucking piece of shit older man who should have known better. I just gave a really big spoiler. I think I'm going to cut that out. I just got really passionate and just spat out a really big spoiler. It is really difficult to talk about the plot of the book without spoiling one of the big plot points, but essentially, yeah, you watch Vanessa as an adult in real time try to grapple with this new understanding and this new way of looking at her entire childhood, and this new way of looking at a relationship with someone who is still present day in her life. And also just watching Jacob try and fucking talk his way out of it again. And just like, I could not put this book down. It's just absolutely, it's just addictive. Like, the writing is addictive. The story is addictive. You feel so much compassion and empathy for child Vanessa and so much sadness for adult Vanessa. You see the way in which these insidious relationships truly just go on to absolutely ruin a person for the rest of their life. And then you also get a little bit of hope when Vanessa at the end sort of begins to unravel everything that has happened to her and hopefully begin to heal and move on. So as much as it definitely is Sad Girl Lit Fic, it does have like a little bit of a hopeful ending, because you do get to see what happens to a victim when they're able to come to terms with what has happened to them and seek help and begin the process of healing. So that was really, really beautiful. But I think this book is just fabulous. It talks about power in relationships and abuse, and as I said, the way that victims are forced to try and do mental gymnastics in their mind to deal with something so traumatic. I could talk about this book for years. Please read it, My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. Okay, so if we started with a really obvious Sad Girl Lit Fic, we're going to finish with a really obvious Sad Girl Lit Fic. But I'm doing this as a public service to those people out there, like me, until very recently, who have not read Sally Rooney. I don't know why. I think I do that, like, I'm not like other girls thing where when like something's really popular, I'm like, I don't want to read it. So for so long, I didn't read Sally Rooney and I didn't understand the hype. And then I did, and I was like, okay, I see, I get it. Everyone should read Normal People by Sally Rooney. This is like, if Sylvia Plath had the girlies in a chokehold in the 1950s for Sad Girl Lit Fic, Sally Rooney has the girls in a chokehold in the 21st century. Hello, thank you so much. Read this immediately. So this follows Marianne and Connell, who grow up in very different households. Marianne is very unpopular in school, but her parents are very wealthy and well off, so she lives a very sheltered life in that manner. But Connell, who is our other main character in this book, is very, very popular at school, but he lives a very hard life in terms, like, his mother is not wealthy, he lives in a bit of a rundown home, but we get to experience both the POV of both characters, and it's just watching two people who should be together and they just can't make it work. It's like wrong person, right time, wrong person, and they just keep crashing into each other across the years. We follow them from high school when they first meet all the way through to adulthood where they finished college, I think, or finishing college. And you're rooting for them the whole way from start to finish, or at least I was. And it's really quite heartbreaking just watching them come together and fall apart and come together and fall apart and just not quite be able to make it work. I'm going to warn you, the way this book ends is infuriating, and I need you to go into that knowing it, because I read the last page and I was like, what do you mean? This is a book that I desperately needed like 700 more pages of. I could have just read about these two characters forever. I found them so addictive, so you just want to curl up in their world and stay there. But it truly is. One of my friends who read this, I think she summed it up really well, which is that the miscommunication trope in romance books especially can be really frustrating when you're like, just fucking talk to each other. Oh my God, just have a conversation and you will solve all of this. What I love about how Sally Rooney has handled the miscommunication trope is Marianne and Connell are constantly talking about their feelings, constantly trying to explain to one another why they are the way they are, and they just can't get the other to see their perspective, and they can't understand each other's perspective. So it's like a miscommunication trope just done so well. I had my heart broken for Marianne over and over and over again, because I've never read a character who is so desperate for love but so incapable of receiving it because of circumstances entirely out of their control. Sally Rooney is the modern day patron saint of Sad Girl Lit Fic, and if you have not read her, please take this as your sign to immediately go and do it now, because I can promise you will not regret it. A lot of people don't like the fact that Sally Rooney doesn't use punctuations, particularly speech punctuation. I actually quite like that as a writing device. I find it makes the reading experience very seamless, and it's truly not like blah 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 blah, Connell said, blah 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 blah, Marianne said. It's just, as someone who pictures things in their mind as I read, it makes it a very seamless viewing experience for me up here. But I understand that a lot of people don't like that. So I guess just go into this book knowing that she doesn't use any speech punctuation. So all of the speech is just like at one with the rest of the story. But those are my, I guess I'm going to say like beginner's guide to Sad Girl Lit Fic, because I do think there are definitely other ones that I could talk about. And maybe I'll do a part 2. Let me know if you want me to do a part 2, because I do read a lot of Sad Girl Lit Fic, and I don't think I'm going to be stopping anytime soon. Let's be so for real. The Sad Girl Lit Fic phase will continue for probably a while, you know, probably for a while. Also, I love the juxtaposition of me talking about some of the most beautifully written books I've ever read with lights out in the background. Don't look at that. That's just been there the whole video, I realize. On another note, I did really enjoy this. This is just, this is me riffing about books now. I have really needed some brain off stalker, mafia, hacker romance. And you know what? It really did it for me. I really hate the way the cover has bent though. So maybe I'll actually put it upside down. Oh, that's better. Oh my God, I wished I'd realized that and that wasn't sticking up the entire video. Anyway, if you've made it to this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry if this one was like a little bit manic and all over the place, but I am trying to, I guess, just, also, if you're new to my channel, this is the part of the video where I stop talking about books and just start talking about how much of a mess my life is. So thank you so much for enjoying the book part. Now just strap in for my ranting. I am definitely trying to get into more of a routine and my new life, I guess, now that I've moved. It's really bizarre because it felt like such a monumental shift, and yet my job is the same, my friends are the same, my routine is technically the same, but at the same time I've had this huge shift in my life, which is just really a bizarre thing to wrap my head around. Wow, when I close my eyes, it's just the ring light. It's really been a big shift, and I have really struggled to find motivation to do anything remotely creative. So TLDR, I'm sorry if this video felt a little manic and all over the place. Usually I like sit down and write notes and have some like quippy little things to say. This was just like, I perused my bookshelves. I knew what I wanted to do a video about. I perused my bookshelves, picked some of my favorites and was like, well, we're gonna do the video now. So if it felt a little cray, that is why. And I do feel like I'm getting back into more of a routine, and I have some ideas for videos that I want to do, so it should get a little bit more efficient and together in the coming videos. But thank you so much for watching. It feels like it's been 700 years since I've sat down and filmed something, so I'm glad that at the very least I ripped the band-aid off. I filmed the first video in the new house. I filmed the first video on what feels like, I just said, 700 years. I'm going to go and edit this now and then immediately post it, because again, I'm usually like, I try to be a couple of days ahead of schedule. I am the day, if you're watching this, the day it comes out, I filmed it today. She's a film and edit and release kind of day, which I usually don't like to do because that's a lot of pressure, but you know. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up because I can tell that I'm rambling and this video is probably going to go for 45 minutes if I don't shut up. But thank you so much for watching. The vlogs are going to be starting again, hopefully next week. As I mentioned in a post, I had a death in the family on top of everything else that's been going on. So the vlog content may be sparse because filming has not really been high on my list of priorities. But we're hopefully getting back into the swing of things, and I love you so much for sticking around. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, don't leave a mean comment or I will cry, and I will see you in the next video. Mwah! Bye!